We are in the midst of the Lok Sabha elections that will elect a new government, the results on June 4. But before the results and before the second round of voting takes place, a familiar old bogey has come up again. This is the inheritance tax, a tax that supposedly would reduce inequality and provide for greater economic balance. At least that's the argument that's been advanced by the likes of Sam Pitroda of the Congress, and as expected, that has sparked a furor about the need and justification for an inheritance tax in India. On the show today on Easynomics, I have a panel of experts with me, and the question that I'll pose to them: are inheritance taxes required in India? Do they work? What is the international experience in this regard? Among many other questions. And joining me to debate that, Sudhir Kapadia, Senior Partner of Tax and Regulatory Services at EY. We are also joined by one of India's most well-known income tax experts, Mr. Ved Jain. We are also joined by Professor Arun Kumar, author and former Professor of Economics at Jawaharlal Nehru University. During the show, we'll also be joined by other guests. But I'm coming to you straight away, Sudhir, for the first question. Inherent taxes were abolished in 85 in India. Given the overall tax policy approach that we have had for many years since then, does an inheritance tax make sense in the Indian context?
Thanks, Siddharth. The short answer, according to me, my personal view is it does not make sense at this stage. The reason it was abolished was that the government stated it in so many terms that the cost of collection exceeded the revenue. So it was just not worth the effort and the complexity. I would just take a step back and, just for the context, we must remember that pre-liberalization, which we all know, pre-1991, what we had in the country was astonishingly high personal income tax rates. I'm sure Mr. Jain would remember, it went up to 97% above a certain threshold in certain years, 97% plus a 5% wealth tax. So we had all kinds of taxes, and theoretically, with that kind of progressive tax system which India experimented with for a long period of 60 odd years, 6 decades, if that was successful, then by 1991 there would have been no need for economic liberalization. So the history of India's economic development shows that these kind of tax policies were a colossal failure. The reasons were many, but mainly, obviously it's a disincentive for anyone who has to pay that high level of taxes on all fronts to really do anything, better for betterment, for self-betterment. Two is these kind of taxes only resulted in high levels of evasion. And of course, three is the level of digitization which we see today was simply not there. So that is one context which I think we should bear in mind. And history has again shown, economic history, post-liberalization, with moderate rates of taxation, India has been doing much better. And particularly in the last 10 years, if you see the personal income tax, I will draw attention to personal income tax, tax buoyancy has been the highest, even better than corporate income tax. So therefore, the question is, what is the objective? If the objective is that we should get optimal tax revenues, I think the current tax system, as I said, the direction came right from 1991 onwards, seems to be working better. It is getting better in terms of tax buoyancy. We have GST also, where the collections are on the upswing. So you are getting incrementally better revenue. So if the objective is better tax revenues for betterment of the larger good, we are achieving that. Then the second question is, what else is the objective? If it is only to simply signal that something is being done to end inequality without really hard outcomes, I don't think that should be the purpose. So I think, to my mind, this is a wrong time to think of introducing such taxes when adequate wealth has first to be created in the economy.
Okay, Sudhir Kapadia's point, first create adequate wealth and then talk about it. You called it a colossal failure in the past, and that is why Rajiv Gandhi, at the time that he did it, did something that was quite welcome at that point of time. We also have Rajeev Mantri, author and venture capital investor with us. But I am going to Professor Arun Kumar first for a quick overall view before I go to Ved Jain and then Rajeev. Professor Kumar, where do you stand on this? You heard Sudhir Kapadia. Is this what is the panacea for inequality in India? Will this help our economy grow, and will this tax, if it were to be at all implemented, help reduce poverty in any way?
So, we need to consider that the Credit Suisse report of 2018 pre-pandemic showed that 1% of Indians have more than 50% of the wealth, whereas the bottom 60% have only less than 5% of the wealth. So the wealth inequality is very high, but there are three kinds of inequality in the economy. There's the consumption inequality, the income inequality, and the wealth inequality. It is the income inequality which results in the wealth inequality, because higher the income, higher the savings. So what we need to tackle is the income inequality. Now, to tackle the wealth inequality, there are two ways of doing it. One is the inheritance tax, which looks at the intergenerational inequality. And to reduce the intergenerational inequality, you require an inheritance tax. But if you want to reduce the wealth inequality for the current, then you require a wealth tax and a gift tax. Now, there are different kinds of things that are taking place in the economy. And as the Credit Suisse report says, the higher the inequality, it depends on the system, because there are many other countries where there's much greater equality, and equality brings about social harmony. In fact, the argument in the Credit Suisse report is that India is one of the highest inequalities, and it's coming from the system. It's coming from the system of taxation, it's coming from the system of cronyism and various other such things. So in other words, what we need to do is we need to bring about greater equity for social reasons, also for economic reasons. Because when the poor people have lower purchasing power, then the demand in the economy becomes short. And when demand is short, then what happens is that, the rate of growth of the economy falls.
Right.
Now, if you want to get more jobs, then you require higher growth. The third thing I want to point out is that globally, now the rich people are demanding. Warren Buffett in 2011 said, unless the rich people pay more taxes, capitalism cannot survive.
Right.
President Biden also said the same thing in 2023. And Warren Buffett was supported by George Soros, by Bill Gates, by various other rich in the US, in Italy, France, in Germany. Also, if you remember, Henry Ford in 2011, he said, what will I do producing the Model T car unless my workers can buy it? So he was also saying that the people at the bottom should have higher...
Fair point, Professor Kumar. Ved Jain, I am coming to you on Professor Kumar's point, and I would argue that is why you have slabs in income tax. The more you earn, the higher rate of tax that you are liable to pay, and you have cesses and surcharges also that are levied, perhaps with a different purpose.
I was coming to that point.
Let me go to Mr. Jain. Professor Kumar, I'll come to you so that everyone gets an equal opportunity. Mr. Jain, do you think that this is the way to ensure a greater equity? Because we already have slabs in income tax. Then why even talk about intergenerational transfer taxation?
See, sometimes some idea looks attractive because it looks to be a populistic measures, but we need to understand the ground reality and the ultimate goal which a country or which a society wants to achieve. Idea is to achieve an economic growth, and prosperity and equality will come only when we are able to do more business. There is a growth in the economy, we are able to generate employment, we are able to make people enabler rather than dependent. That's the most important aspect of any economic growth, and that's a success of a country. So keeping that in mind, to answer your first question first, that's why direct taxes are kept in what we call a progressive system of taxation. As your income grows up, your ability to pay increases, and that's why there is a progressive rate of taxation. If you have an income below threshold, you need not pay any tax. If you have an income above threshold to a particular amount, you have a capacity to pay 5 or 10%. If you go beyond that threshold limit, then you have a capacity to pay 20%, beyond that 30%. So that's why the Indian system and the global system is on direct taxes on personal taxation is almost same. And in India, the present rate of taxations are almost equivalent to one of the what we call the best rate in the globally, whether it is Europe, whether it's America or other country. 30%, and then surcharge going up to 37% or 25% on income above 5 crore. That's a progressive rate of taxation. Now, the second issue is whether there should be inheritance tax or not. We must keep the history of India in mind and how our economy has grown up over the period. We introduced inheritance tax way back. India at that point of time was following what we call the so-called socialism, but more inclined to communalism, communist theory, working it out. It didn't work. Economy could not grow, and that's why we abolished it way back in 1985. We abolished our gift tax in 1998. We abolished our wealth tax in 2016. The reasons you need to understand. We need to build capital. Now, from where the investment will flow? Do we intend to believe that all investment in infrastructure, new project, manufacturing, and make in India in 2047 capital of the world, manufacturing capital?
Right.
Where the money will come? Money will come from the entrepreneur. An entrepreneur need to have the capital, and that capital will come where they earn and they pay taxes on the regularly every year, and they save money, and that money they save, they employ in businesses, they deploy in business and create employment, and that employment create demand consumption, and that will propel the economy. That's a multiplier effect. Yeah.
Right. Rajeev Mantri, is it just a political gambit at this stage because it's election time? There is one-upmanship in politics, and therefore just throw this red herring out there and create a buzz, and perhaps there might be some voters who would think that money will be taken from the rich and it will be redistributed. Will it even work that way?
Well, it's, one of the oldest fictions in the world that you can make the poor rich by making the rich poor. It has failed everywhere. It has never worked. We have decades of economic history to bear this out. And I don't know whether it's a political gimmick or not. Maybe some political experts should answer that question. But I do think it's a highly toxic statement because it has a chilling effect onto those who have wealth and assets. When you start putting out policy proposals and ideas of this tone and tenor, you are essentially casting all kinds of doubts and fears in the minds of those who are supposed to make capital allocation and investment decisions. It is all well to say that there is a certain level of inequality, but then as some of the other panelists have pointed out, we have a progressive system of taxation. And when we fixate upon, there are certain intellectuals who always want to fixate upon how many billionaires are there in India. They don't want to talk about how many hundreds of millions of people have escaped poverty because of economic growth. People are getting jobs on a scale in the formal economy which was not available earlier. People are getting opportunities to start companies. Now, when you start a company, who's providing the risk capital? The risk capital is coming from the same rich people who are being targeted in this manner by different groups. Some of them are intellectuals, some of them are in the political field. But the point is, if you toxify the environment in the country, you will again land in an environment of fear where people will start pulling back their purse strings. They might have a second thought whether they want to invest in India. They might have another thought on whether their capital and their assets are safe in India. So I think all of this kind of chatter does a lot of damage to where we want to go in the next 20-25 years. Our goal should be to become a developed economy. Our goal should be to achieve a high level of per capita income. The inequality part, one can always quibble about. I'm sure many of the professors and intellectuals who are talking about the curse of inequality will prefer to live, in London or New York, and they will never go to Cuba. Cuba might be less unequal, but they will not go and live in Cuba. They'll live in London or New York. So let's be clear about that.
Sudhir Kapadia, will an inheritance tax or similar instruments, do they help in expanding the tax net? Because in the Indian context, if we were to take a very broad stroke view of the last 10 years, we have seen a significant cut as far as corporate taxes are concerned. As far as PIT, we can say that it has remained moderate. There have been some exemptions or tweaks in the slabs, but broadly speaking, there hasn't been too much of income tax change on the PIT front in India in the past 10 years. There was this big corporate tax change. So will it help in expanding the tax net and bringing more revenues for the exchequer?
Yeah, so Siddharth, my view is it will not. And so let's step back on the reforms you just mentioned of the last 10 years. I think corporate, we are not discussing, it's to do with, business tax. Two things. One is this higher rate surcharge, the point Professor Arun Kumar rightly made about, certain people calling for a higher tax on that is already introduced in India even before COVID set in. We already have a very high surcharge on higher income earners. It is in play as we speak, number one. Number two, we have to remember that India in between followed a dividend distribution tax mechanism where the company distributing dividends paid tax. And a very substantial shareholder promoter with huge dividend income actually did not pay any tax at her level. That changed 2 or 3 years ago. Now you pay the highest slab rate, your entire tax and lower rate of growth in taxation. I can understand the desire to tinker and try and add and try and do something different. As I said before, the statistics show that we are doing actually very well on tax buoyancy thanks to the digitization of the tax administration. It is helping small taxpayers, it's also helping plug leakages. So if we are on a path where our growth trajectory of both GST and income taxes is getting better and better, I don't think there is a need to superimpose another tax. And last but not the least, frankly speaking, if more wealthy people are there in an economy, we have to remember that the money will go either in assets or in expenditure. If it goes in expenditure, you collect more GST. If it goes in assets like real estate, 225 or 250 industries benefit from it. So therefore, you still get ultimately more tax revenues when you have more wealthy people remaining in your market, in your country.
That's why it is said that being poor is a curse and being wealthy may be a burden, but only for a few. Kaushik Basu, former CA, has also tweeted and said that there is no moral justification for those who are born rich as far as the inheritance that they receive, and therefore inheritance tax is a must to curb inequality. And also, viewers, ever since this controversy broke out, the most searched for item, what is inheritance tax, and we can try and show you some of the results of Google searches that we've been noticing. The fact that a lot of people are searching both for Sam Pitroda and what is inheritance tax, just as an aside to see the kind of interest that this topic has generated. Now, if this kind of Google search were to influence voter behavior, that would be a different story. We don't know the answer to that. But Professor Kumar, I come back to you on that point where Sudhir Kapadia actually pointed out that it is not as if India, the wealthy are escaping taxation. It is not as if dividends are not being taxed. Buoyancy has gone up, and therefore tax policy, which is multi-decadal, should be multi-decadal, has been doing a fair enough and good job. So is it just a red herring to bring this up at this point of time during the election cycle, Professor Kumar?
Well, election time is always Jumla time. So a lot of Jumlas are thrown around. There's no doubt about that. But the point is that you see in income tax data, if you look, the detailed data was available for 2021. It shows that 6.6% of the population is filing tax return. But actually, if you look at it, 0.7% are the effective taxpayers and 0.016% are those who are declaring income above 1 crore. So actually, it's the accumulation of wealth with 0.7% and 0.016% that is causing the disparity.
So surely, Professor Kumar, sorry to interrupt you, because I just want a quick follow-up on that point.
Let me complete.
Okay,
Please
sure.
Let me complete my point. If you interfere like this, it's all right to disagree,
I
but
think
don't
it's totally unfair to allow one person to speak for this kind of length. There are others also waiting to speak.
But have I spoken for this length?
Okay, go ahead. Rajeev, let Professor Kumar complete his point.
Don't get personal. Don't make it personal.
No, not at all, sir. Not at all, sir. Not at all.
Disagree.
Sir, let me intervene as the moderator. Professor Kumar,
I have not intervened in anybody else's speaking. Everybody
sir.
else wants to intervene. So the point I'm making is that, you see, in India, the problem is that our investment rate had peaked in 2012-13. After that, it has come down. Why has it come down? Because capacity utilization has come down. If you look at the RBI data, capacity utilization had come down to as low as 69%, which means that the investment rate of the private sector had actually come down. And that's why investment rate has not gone up. Now, what do you need to do? If you give tax cuts, that doesn't lead to increase in demand. What you need to do is give incomes in the hand of people at the bottom. 94% of the people are in the unorganized sector. 90% of them earn less than 10,000 rupees per month. If they earn that low, how can demand rise? And that is where the distribution of wealth and the distribution of income is important. You need to have better education, better health, for which you require direct taxes to be collected. And if you do that, then people will become entrepreneurs. At the moment, industry says that large number of young people are unemployable because, as the ACER report shows, children in the age group of 14 to 18 cannot do second class reading, writing, or maths. Most children, therefore, drop out. They don't do higher education. There is very little higher education in the country. So for doing that, for reforming, so that you can get better employment, better education, you do need taxes. And for that, redistribution is required. Inheritance tax is only intergenerational. Wealth tax is actually from within the same generation, trying to collect more taxes so that, you can have a better population, better educated and literate population, which will then lead to growth.
Okay. Rajeev, you wanted to come in a quick point, and then I'll go to Ved Jain.
The problem with this construct, which Professor Arun is proffering us, is that he's entirely focused on how much money is being spent. He's not interested in outcomes. He's not interested in measuring what is being achieved with that money. Has he even looked at what this government has delivered in the last 10 years and how the direct benefit transfer scheme has worked? How different welfare and other measures being made available to a wider set of the population through DBT and other mechanisms has actually reduced leakages, which means that the outlays have decreased. But he only goes on talking about the outlays as if outlays matter and nothing else matters.
Professor Kumar, do you want to respond to that quickly, sir?
We are talking about taxation and revenue. If you have
now you can't shift the goalpost. Now you can't shift the goalpost.
You are changing the goalpost.
You are a master of this art, sir.
We are talking about...
You are a master of this art. You are a master of shifting goalpost and saying whatever you want.
Listen, we are talking about taxation and revenue. You are talking about expenditure. You are shifting the goalpost.
So what is taxation and revenue for? What is it for? It is not an end in itself.
Look, if you
taxation
want to...
and revenue is for a purpose. The purpose is delivering welfare. If that purpose is to achieve, why should we raise more revenue?
If you want to discuss expenditures, we'll have a separate discussion on that.
No, these are the same discussion.
That's not the topic of today.
This is the same discussion. You cannot hijack the discussion by interjecting.
You are hijacking the... Listen, you are hijacking. I'm not hijacking.
Okay, let me bring in Ved Jain to this. Mr. Jain, the point that I want to ask you is that we saw at one point of time, and I remember talking to you during that show also, we had close to 97.5% tax incidence in India. From there, we have moved to and gone ahead with a progressive tax architecture. If any, and it's not in the realm of possibility, and we are just discussing a hypothetical situation. However, if it were to come, would it not be fair to say that the rich would find ways to escape such a levy? They will create trusts, they will find other structures, and they will take the help of knowledgeable chartered accountants and firms and create structures to escape such a levy, and we will be left holding an empty can at the end of the day.
I feel, Siddharth, that's a human nature. So everybody will like to plan the tax in a manner, and its economic policies, its financial structure in a manner where tax get minimized. There is no second thought, and this phenomena and this psychology is not limited to India. It is across the globe. I have been practicing on international sites, and I have seen how that tax planning is done. There is no harm in that issue. But to address the issue which my friends have raised, both Akshayji and Rajivji has raised, the issue is the larger interest of the economy is at the heart. Why we collect taxes and why we distribute it. The issue is taxes are collected to meet the expenditure, which includes social expenditure also. But at the same time, objective is to make the population enabled, not dependent. Now, if you snatch away the money from the people who have the money and distribute it to the people who do not have money, from where the money will come tomorrow? Now, Mr. Akshay Kumar said that only 0.16% people are the rich people are there having the capital. I say yes, but there is no harm because these are the people where they're keeping the money, they are providing the necessary capital for the investment. Now, India is looking to such a large investment for 2047 when we want to make India as one of the largest capital economy of the world. We want to, from where the money will come. The money will, see, even if a person is earning money and after paying 35 or 40% tax, 60% is saved, and I say 5-10% is household expenditure, where the 50% goes? It goes in investment. And investment will, where it goes into economy, because what that money will be utilized for, but for the development, for putting factories, generating employment. Now, what you do in case you collect some more taxes by levying inheritance type taxes, what you will do? You will give those, you will give subsidy. People will become more dependent. People will become more inefficient on that way. I do agree, subsistence should be there. Enough money should be given, but the money which is required for infrastructure, it has to be self-sustained.
Right.
And you need for development, it needs to be self-sustained. And that is the money which follows. And this model has been followed across the globe. We have seen from 60s to 19 the model of the Russia and the other countries which have been following, and what ended up in 90s, late 90s. And now later on how the development is taking place.
Right.
We have how liberalization has helped India in economic growth. Now our per capita GDP is $2,500 and we are looking to double it by 2040. And in the next 6, 7, 8 years, how it is going to be? We want to achieve 7% economic growth unless the private investment will come from where it. Now say tomorrow if somebody want to put up a plant for 100 crore rupees from
Right.
25 crore rupees, from where the money will come? The money comes only this. So money with individual, money with corporate is not a bad money. That is also money with the nation, with money with the country, and to be used for productive purposes. Our thought process is that in case the money is in a private hand, it is individual hand or in a corporate hand, it is a bad money, and that's it doesn't belong to society. It belongs to society. He is only a manager. He is only an administrator. He is helping the economic growth. Whosoever is the rich industrialist, ultimately he is working for the development of the economy, putting up more plants, generating more employment. That's the objective. And
Okay.
in case capital formation is not there, investment will not happen.
Investment won't happen. I'm completely out of time, but I'll just take 30 seconds each with all four of you. Sudhir Kapadia, I come to you. Given this debate, and obviously it might continue till the election results are known, the budget that will come in July, is there anything that you would be top of your preference list in terms of tax policy that you would expect the new government to announce?
In my view, the tax policy should continue to avoid uncertainties, have a stable tax regime, which you alluded to earlier, focus a lot more on still further improving compliances, ensuring that smaller taxpayers are less and less burdened with compliances, and provide an enabling environment for businesses to prosper. I think that itself would generate a lot more positive growth, and I would say address the inequality question, which is a real question, but that is a much better way to address it in my personal view.
Ved Jain, the question to you and a quick answer before I go to the other two guests. Do you think that some of the issues around joblessness and the context of corporates being leading in job creation, wouldn't it make sense for some sort of tax concessions to be given to those companies which create more and more employment? Would you favor such an idea?
I do favor an idea, and to answer, I will just take that in a second. One is the tax law should be equitable, fair, and accountable. One. Secondly, in case we want to make India really the global capital of the manufacturing capital of the world, we need to promote manufacturing. And that's why we have introduced a concession rate of tax of 15% for corporate who put up a new plant and new machinery and who started it.
Right.
Which a sunset clause has come on 31st March 24. I am of the view that in case India has not become now manufacturing capital of the world, it
Right.
has to become, and that's why we must encourage those who want to set up industry, etc., because they will generate employment. At the end of the day, taxes are levied for the help for the society.
Okay.
In case purpose of society gets served by putting up more manufacturing plant, more employment, that is a much better way. And that's why I say corporate tax rate for new manufacturing should be 15% with lesser burden of compliance, transparency, equality, and accountability with the tax administration.
Rajeev Mantri, the same question to you before I let Professor Kumar have the last word. Quickly, one point that you feel should be addressed in the upcoming budget.
So I have long spoken about this, that India needs a new direct tax code.
Okay.
So we need to overhaul the way we had an overhaul of indirect taxes via the GST. We need to overhaul the direct tax code. We need to have a new code for personal income tax, even for corporate income tax, etc.
Fair point. Fair point. Fair point. Professor Kumar, complete.
That's just to complete 5 more seconds. That's just not for in terms of the rate changes or anything, but in terms of how capital assets are taxed and certain anomalies and kind of outdated aspects exist there. So those should be reformed.
Fair point, because there has been a move to take away all exemptions and move towards lower incidence. Professor Kumar, that final question to you, 30 seconds answer. What would you want from the upcoming budget as far as tax is concerned?
So, the taxation should enable the problems of the economy to be sorted out. The problems are joblessness. The problem of joblessness will not be solved by the corporate sector because that only employs 6% of the workforce. 94% is in the unorganized sector. Unless you promote the unorganized sector in a big way, employment generation will not be buoyant. Demand is low because incomes at the lower level are low. Therefore, the investment rate has declined after 2012-13 from 36.5% to almost 30% in between. That has to be raised through demand. Capacity utilization, as per the RBI data, Obicus data, had fallen to 69%. That needs to go back to around 78-79%. For that, you require demand so that the industry can operate much faster. That would induce growth, that will result in higher tax collection. So rather than give tax concessions, what we need to do is generate demand. And that requires redistribution of income at the lower end so that demand can be buoyant. That's the only way economy will start growing at 7-8%. At the moment, the economy is not growing at 7-8%. It's growing at much lower rate because the unorganized sector is not counted in our GDP independently. And that's why the rate of growth is low. Even before the pandemic, you saw the rate of growth fall from 8% per quarterly to 3.1% because of demand inequality. So you need to check those things.
Okay, viewers, we've had a wide span of responses to some of these key questions, but the argument for such an inheritance tax, if it were to be done, not too many countries around the world do this. The claim is it reduces inequality, it allocates resources more efficiently, provides social stability, and the argument against is it won't reverse inequality. It will lead to slowdown, it will lead to flight of capital, and will be a colossal mistake. We'll wait for the election results to know whether this debate will get carried forward. For now, I want to thank all my guests for their time with us today, and you, the viewer. We'll be back with more. Until then, goodbye.
It was 17 years